Well, I thought we were about due for another Volvo 850R update. It's been a few months since I talked about this car, and I thought I'd also take the opportunity to discuss winter preparation. What do I do with this thing in the cold months? Do I store it? Do I keep driving it? We're going to go over some of that in this video. First, a couple of modifications and changes that I've done recently to this car. As you can probably hear, or can't, I took off the IPD exhaust. I have a stock 850R exhaust down here all the way from the turbo back. So lost a little bit of power, but it sounds a lot better on the highway, and you still get some of that 5-cylinder howl, but it's just a little bit more muted. And as you can also see, I poorly painted the exhaust tip black, but it looks a lot better than the rusty tip that was on there before. I was pretty happy to get rid of that IPD exhaust. Actually sold it to a subscriber who modified it some, and he's enjoying it quite a bit. I'm still rocking the 16-inch wheel and tire setup that I got on Tire Rack. These Michelin Cross Climate Pluses are fantastic in daily driving scenarios. They're a little bit squishy for performance driving, but over the potholes and the rough roads we have here in Michigan. Otherwise, I recently got done doing some maintenance to this just to get it ready for the winter. FCP Euro sent me some Liqui Moly products to test. I put a fuel system cleaner in the gas tank, put in their engine flush product, ran it for about 10 minutes before I changed the oil, and then topped everything off with their new Liqui Moly Molygen 5W40 oil. All good stuff from FCP Euro. They've been really helpful in keeping this car running tip-top since I bought it last October. So anyway, let's hop in, take this thing for a drive, and talk about winter prep and maintenance. As we just discussed, the first thing I usually do is an oil change. Just get all the maintenance up to date, make sure everything's good. I really only had about 2,000 miles on this car all year, but it had been about 8 months since I had done my last oil change. So it was definitely due for one, and I was even getting a little bit of lifter tick on startup. The new Liqui Moly oil solved that, and we're off and running. So, winter prep. What do I do with this thing in the winter? Well, I don't drive it as much as I do in the summer months, that's for sure. So I do put a full tank of fuel in and add a bottle of Stable as a fuel stabilizer to keep the gas from going bad. However, I don't like to let my car sit in the winter. Just because it's cold out doesn't necessarily mean there's a ton of salt on the road, and I'd rather keep the fluids running through it than just let it sit and dry out, so to speak. And I really enjoy driving this car. Insurance isn't that expensive, it's cheap to run, it's a real pleasure to get into every week or two and take it out for a 45-minute drive and just enjoy it on these back roads. This is kind of something I've always done with my cars to varying levels of success. I did daily drive my Miata over a winter, and I learned my lesson. Not a good idea. Definitely you get a bunch of rust and corrosion all over your brand new suspension components, and that's not necessarily something that I want to deal with this Volvo 850R. So I think there's a nice middle ground. I don't like completely putting away your car and not touching it for 5 or 6 months, or maybe even 4 months. I will probably spray just a little bit of rattle can crown rust proofing oil on some of the suspension components, especially since everything is so brand new and rust free. The chassis, the body, I'm not really that concerned about. Volvo has some pretty thick and heavy duty rust proofing here from the factory. This 850R is about where I've always wanted it right now. There's really only a couple more things I'd like to do to it. But my goal with this car was just kind of to make it OEM plus. I don't want to make it a tire smoking maniac. It doesn't need a lot more power than it had stock. And even though I lost probably about 15-20 horsepower taking off the IPD exhaust recently, I don't really miss it. Especially in this cold weather, you do get a little bit of extra boost. Really the only other thing I think I'd change here soon is I did buy some stainless steel braided brake lines, but I'm always a little bit hesitant to install those myself. Had some bad past experiences, so I'm gonna have to take it to a shop at some point and get those put in and have the brakes thoroughly bled. idea what that rattle is. It's pretty annoying. It's only at wide open throttle, but it's something that kind of creeps up once the weather gets cold out, and all summer it lays dormant. But one of those weird little old car things. Otherwise, I've just been enjoying this car. I drive it a couple times a week. I try to at least put 100 miles or so on it every week to keep things running smoothly. And I just enjoy it. It's kind of my reset button. We're always driving press cars and brand new vehicles, and it's so refreshing to get into something like this with a nice 5-speed manual transmission, old school turbocharging technology. I've always said this 850R is modern enough to be comfortable and livable, and not frightening to drive or weird to drive and live with, but it still has that old school tactile feel and visceral nature that just makes things a little bit more exciting. It's great to daily drive on a normal basis in traffic, but it's also a pretty fun performance car too. I think in the summer I would like to get a set of sticky performance tires and try my hand at a track day in this, see how it holds up. I'll go easy. Heat management is definitely key in something like that with an old car, but I think in stock form it should probably do pretty well with the upgraded brakes. Why do people always go 45 and at 55? I'll never understand it. This thing is such a pleasure to drive. It's not necessarily sporty, but it's fun. There's just a little bit of body roll. It reminds you of what things were like in the old days. Like I said, it's my reset button. Otherwise, I don't really have too many grandiose plans for this. I'd like to keep this car pretty close to stock and pretty conservative. I know it's not exciting, but you know what? That's what I like. I wouldn't mind getting a mild tune for this. Yes, it could use a little bit more power, but as long as I'm able to put that power down on a set of sticky tires, I think, you know, a car like this needs to be balanced. I still have an open differential, and throwing a limited slip in here would be fantastic, and I wouldn't be afraid to push it to 300 horsepower plus after that, but that's a pretty invasive thing to add. It's pretty much an engine out procedure, so if this ever needs some major work, that's the first thing I'll do is throw a diff in here. But until then, or if that ever even happens, I'm pretty happy with it as it is. Sometimes it's just nice enjoying your cars as they are and being thankful that they even work and are on the road. Personally, I like to drive my cars more than I like to work on them, and modifying is nice and it is fun, but it always results in more failures, more work, more maintenance, and I'm not sure I really want to deal with that. Volvo did a fantastic job setting this car up from the factory, and with a refreshed suspension from FCP Euro, the sway bars from IPD, this feels pretty nice around a corner. Really all it needs is a nice set of high-performance summer tires. Alright guys, well hopefully you've enjoyed this 850R update. Let me know if there's anything you want to see more on this car. If we get a nice snow here soon, I would like to test out these Michelin Cross Climate Plus tires. They supposedly do quite well in the winter weather, if I can get out on an evening or something where there hasn't been any salt laid out yet, and we've got a nice fresh dusting, I'd be very curious to see how this car handles in the powder. Probably even do a reverse donut or two. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. We've got some more content coming for you this weekend. Stay tuned. We'll see you later.